We all hear it, right? The bouncing basketball in every college gym. And then the questions, what do you think? That goes with some serious hand wringing. What is really going to happen? Well, we have no clue what this season's going to bring, but we've got to talk about who is who in the ACCs today, right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends. It is Monday, October 28th, 2024. Happy Halloween week, and we welcome the month of November, the month where we intersect so many college sports, and it is fantastic. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, national correspondent at The Next. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Women's Basketball. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA newsletter. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your favorite $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the buzz is building all across the country. We are 1 week away from today is the official start of the college basketball season, and I know I cannot wait. Preseason rankings and picks and players are out, and there's so very much to talk about. Today, we dive into what I think is a deep and loaded conference, the ACC. There's 3 new teams. There are marquee players back from injury, storylines abound. What about the new coaches in the ACC? What do the preseason rankings tell us? Who's going to be the sleepers this season that we need to keep an eye on? Here to help me deep dive on everything is the one person I know who's got his thumb on all things ACC, and that is Mitchell Northam, straight from the good state of North Carolina. Mitchell, good afternoon, my friend. I want to start with the fact that there are new coaching faces in this league. Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting because not only are there 3 new teams, you were on here with me probably 6 weeks ago, and we talked about Migration Day, the new teams joining the ACC and Cal and Stanford and SMU. But I think one thing that also turns a lot of heads is when you have new faces at the heads of programs. So let's talk a little bit about some of these coaching changes first and foremost, what you think they bring to the table. And I want to start with Virginia Tech because that has been a program that has been at the top of the ACC now for the last few years. Kenny Brooks built that program into what it has been. The question is, what sort of sustainability is there and what success do you think Virginia Tech will have this upcoming season?
Yeah, I definitely think, it's going to be hard, for Virginia Tech this season in terms of like measuring them up against what they have been. They're definitely going to take a step back, I think. Last year they went 25-8. They won the regular season title. The year before they were in the Final Four. It's a question of like how far back is that step? Like, are they still going to be a tournament team? Right. Or are they going to find themselves on the outside of the bubble? They still have some good pieces, but it's really hard to make up, I think, for all the production that you got from 2 like program-changing players in Elizabeth Kitley and Georgia Amoore. Kitley's jersey is already retired. Just an example of how big of an impact she had there. And Amoore is going to be one of the best players in the SEC, might be an All-American, by the time the season's over. Matilda Eck is a player that comes back and was really good last year, one of the best 3-point shooters in the ACC. Carly Wenzel comes back. So they have some good pieces. And I think Megan Duffy is a good coach. She took Marquette to the tournament a few times. One, I think, really smart thing that she did was in assembling her staff, she got 2 former head coaches in this league who know the ACC very well. And Ettore Coleman, who used to be the head coach at Clemson and was most recently an assistant at UNC. And then Jen Hoover, who was the head coach at Wake Forest for a long time. Mm-hmm. I think Virginia Tech is going to be competitive this year. I don't think they're going to be in the mix at the top of the conference. It's definitely kind of a big question mark in terms of like how far they step back and how competitive they are this year with that top level of the conference.
Well, one of the traditional ACC schools is Clemson. They've also got a new coach. I think this, for most people, probably would view this not necessarily as a retool, but I think this has got to be a rebuild at Clemson. Your thoughts as the new head coach there, what this looks like? I mean, they're picked 13th in the preseason poll. That seems pretty realistic from the get-go. You know the goals and the aspirations are much higher there, no doubt about it.
Yeah, talking to Sean Poppy at ACC Tip-Off, and talking to some of their players, and I caught up with Anya Poole over the summer, who transferred from North Carolina to Clemson. I feel like they're going to outperform those expectations. I don't know if they're going to make the tournament, but I think that they're going to surprise some people this year and outperform that 13th projection in the league. This was, like you said, this wasn't a retool. This was a complete rebuild, blow up the roster. They brought in, I think, just, one returner maybe or something like that. They brought in one freshman and 10 transfers. So this was a complete rebuild of the roster. Poppy brought in, a couple players with him from Chattanooga. He got a player from Mercer. He got a player from Belmont. And then two players with former ACC experience in Anya Poole and Loyal McQueen, who used to play at Georgia Tech. I think you're going to see them try to play a lot like his Chattanooga teams did. He went to the tournament both years he was there. They really embraced that kind of 3-and-D style. They want to shoot a lot of threes. They brought in Hannah Cohn, who was at Chattanooga last year. She was a 45% three-point shooter. So they got a lot of interesting pieces. The players seem to really like him, and he knows this league from being an assistant coach under Kenny Brooks at Virginia Tech for a while, as Kenny really built that program up. Sean had a big hand in that. So I think they're going to be, good this year. I don't know if they're going to be good enough to make the tournament, but I definitely think that they're going to maybe outperform some expectations and maybe shock a couple people in terms of some surprising results.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the consensus was this was a really good hire for Clemson. I think one of a great X's and O coach, and obviously has been in the trenches recruiting, understands what you need in the ACC. The other new coach that I think is one that everyone is looking to has been the change of guard at Stanford. Kate Pay takes over. They're new to the league. It's completely foreign to think of Stanford with ACC on their jerseys. But she takes over from Tara Vanderveer, obviously was part of her staff for many years and understood what this transition was going to look like as they come into the ACC. But still, it's so different when you move from one chair to the next. Maybe just your take on what you heard at tip-off, what has been the conversation around Stanford and Kate Pay taking over this program.
Yeah, a lot of people at ACC Tip-Off, because I kind of pay attention to the national picture, were asking me, hey, like, how good is Stanford going to be this year? And that's a big question. Like, they have Cameron Brink. They don't have Kiki Iriafen. They don't have Hannah Jump. All three of those really key players are gone, and Tara Vanderveer is gone. Yeah. But Stanford's still going to be good. There's still, I think, a lock to make the tournament. They have some interesting pieces. Like, one interesting thing about Stanford this year, they're a team that usually doesn't get a lot of transfers, and they got two really good ones this year. Big Ten Freshman of the Year, Mary Ashley Stevenson, and former Santa Clara guard Tess Heel, who was in the top ranks of scoring and assists in the NCAA for the past couple of years. So I think they're still going to be pretty good. They got a couple other starters back. That how that travel affects them is going to be interesting to see. They're basically going to do a system with the new ACC scheduling model where, they'll have like travel partners. So they'll come into North Carolina and they'll play Duke and Wake Forest, or they'll go to Virginia and play Virginia and Virginia Tech. And right. Those will be, along with Cal, one of them will play one on a Thursday and then they'll swap for the Sunday. So how that travel impacts is going to be interesting. I think we've seen a little bit in Big Ten football this year, some of those teams way on the East Coast going to the West, it's been a hurdle, and vice versa. So how it shapes out on the basketball side, I think is going to be something to watch, but I expect Stanford to be a tournament team this year for sure.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. There are so many questions and ones that people haven't been able to answer. We just kind of have to do it before you figure it out. Before we dive into talking about where the rankings are and the teams and some of the players, I got to ask you just sort of a global ACC question. So I think a lot of people in the college sports world were blindsided, very surprised by the retirement of Virginia head men's basketball coach Tony Bennett last week and the statements he made about college sports in general. But this isn't something that I think is happening in a vacuum. I think a lot of people probably have that same theory maybe about Tara Vanderveer and the changes that have come in the landscape of college sports. You're someone, you cover the ACC, you see it in all forms and fashions in all sports. Just your thoughts on Tony Bennett's decision and maybe what that looks like going forward for not only for Virginia in global sense, but maybe just in college sports in general.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at the ACC men's basketball tournament last year and Virginia lost on that crazy buzzer beater that NC State's Michael O'Connell hit, we were all kind of in the media workroom like, is this probably it for Tony Bennett? I mean, like at this point, what else are you coaching for? Because it had seemed like all the changes in the sport had kind of weighed on him. And it had seemed like it was we were entering this phase where Virginia might not be able to win the way that he has done things there, over the course of his tenure. And yeah, like you said, there's been a lot of coaches over the past, 3, 4, 5 years who have gotten out. Some of them, it's just time, right? They're in the 70s and that sort of thing. Your Coach K's, your Nick Saban's, your Roy Williams's, your Tara Vanderveer's. Maybe they stick around a couple other years if we don't have NIL, the transfer portal, conference realignment, all this stuff going on? Maybe. Right. And with the House settlement also looming, that's going to change things a lot. Maybe. But yeah, you also have some coaches who, you would think have a lot of years left of coaching left in them who have decided, you know what, this isn't for me anymore. Katie Meyer is one of those, yes. Who last spring, when they got left on the wrong side of the bubble, she decided to retire. And I think that was a pretty surprising thing for a lot of people who cover and follow ACC women's basketball closely. She's about the same age as Tony Bennett. She's in her mid-50s. And I don't think anybody really saw that coming. When Tony decided to retire, I was paying attention to his press conference, and I thought it was admirable of him to admit, I'm not equipped to coach in this style of game anymore.
Yes.
But then, he made the point about, he didn't think the game was in a good place. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of disagreed with that. If the game is in not a good place, well, then are you saying it was in a good place 5 years ago? And then, so what were the changes 5 years ago? Well, the players weren't getting paid. Is one of the big ones. And they didn't have free movement that a lot of these coaches have. So that was, kind of something that struck me. And I kept thinking about last year during the NCAA tournament in, the first weekend, I was down in Columbia covering the Tar Heels, before they lost to South Carolina. And Courtney Banghart was asked kind of a big picture question about sort of the state of college athletics. And I just pulled the quote up and I was thinking about this as Tony Bennett retired, and she just said, you can't be change resistant. The job I signed on for 20 years ago when I became a head coach is not the job now. The job that I signed on for at Carolina 5 years ago is not the job now. You either evolve or you get out. There have been coaches that have determined that option B was their preferred path. For me, I've adjusted and recognized and adapted. It's so easy to look at the things that make it really challenging and our jobs hard and maybe less satisfying. You lean into what the newness of this is. We are not held hostage by our professions. The coaches that are so negative about it, it's bringing everyone down. Just get out then, do something else. So I thought a lot about that. And just if you're not going to adapt, Tony Bennett's made a lot of money.
Yes, he has. Absolutely.
And while it's a bummer that I saw a lot of people lamenting, oh, we're losing all these great coaches. Tony Bennett is not the last remaining great coach. We got a lot of other really good coaches out there, a lot of good young coaches too, and old. And, Leonard Hamilton's still coaching. He's still around, Jim Larinaga down in Miami. So I just I kind of agree with Courtney in the sense of you either adapt to the change or you take the money you made and you go do something else. Or really, like if Tony Bennett like still wants to coach basketball and like do it his way without NIL in the portal and stuff, I don't know, go coach at a service academy. Like you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely, I think there's options. It's just such a unique time in this sport as we see coaches taking over programs and you see someone like that leave, that it creates a lot of questions. And I think it's good because I think, like you said, you're making people think about what it is and the climate that we're in. And people like Courtney Banghart, they are articulating that. Others are making their choices the way they do. All right. When we come back, it's time to look at this ACC preseason rankings. We've got to look at players. We got to look at teams. So don't go anywhere. We'll get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook, because it's right now. New customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And as always, as someone here in Kansas City, I feel like everyone should bet on the Chiefs right now. Never waste a hunch and make every moment with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, and welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. Mitchell Northam is here today, and we are talking about all things ACC. All right, Mitchell, let's look at this poll. Not to be surprised as we sit, and I'm gonna give off 1 through 10 because there's 18 teams, and holy smokes, it's a lot. Notre Dame at 1, NC State at 2, Duke at 3, then it's Louisville and Florida State, North Carolina at 6, Stanford at 7, Miami at 8, Virginia at 9, and Georgia Tech rounds out number 10. Let's start at the top. Let's talk about this Notre Dame squad. They also are going to be home to the preseason player of the year in this league, and Hannah Hidalgo. Really no surprises that people tag Notre Dame at this spot. It would be really difficult not to have them be. I guess my question to you, because they not only get Olivia Miles back and becomes, I think, maybe the most dynamic backcourt in the nation, but the question is, will they and how do they survive for a little while without Maddie Westfeld, because she's dealing with injury issues and won't be available early in the season?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame got the overwhelming majority of first place votes, like 70 of 79 or something like that. Yeah. And yeah, they have the best backcourt on paper in the country when you talk about not just Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo, but also Sonia Cintron out there probably playing the 3. But yeah, Maddie Westfeld going down, that's a bummer for them. They're dealing with injuries once again in the front court. It seems like Westfeld is going to play at some point this season. Mm-hmm. Hurts them. I mean, that's a starting, caliber ACC post who played really well down the stretch last season, was really big in the ACC tournament. The good news for them is they bolstered that front court depth a little bit in the offseason through the transfer portal. They got Leah King from Pitt, who averaged like 20 and 10 last year. Now she was on a not very good team and got a lot of, was fed a lot of points and, got a lot of rebounds and putbacks that way. But I think she's going to be serviceable and really good for this Notre Dame team. She was the ACC's most improved player last year. And then they also got Lisa Carlin from Marquette, who was an all Big East selection, who I'm sure Megan Duffy would have liked to have had at Virginia Tech. But she goes to Notre Dame, and, the rich gets richer. So, I think those two players, kind of ease the burden a little bit of Westfeld being out for a while. They got a good freshman class in too. So, some of those might be thrown into the fire. But I think far and away, Notre Dame is the team that's going to be chased this year in the ACC.
Well, as you mentioned, those other two names, Olivia Miles and Sonia Citron, who I think Citron may be one of the most complete players in the nation just because of what she does on both ends of the floor, how she can score at every level. She's just so consistent. And having her be at full strength will be huge for Notre Dame. They're both on the preseason All-ACC team. And then also a name on the newcomer watch list is the freshman forward. I believe she's almost 6'4", and Kate Koval. No one's put their eyes on this young lady yet, but obviously for her to make that list of a very big-time group of freshmen, that's also got to help that front court at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I haven't seen her play yet, but I've heard nothing but good things. And Neil Ivy seemed to be very high on her at ACC tip-off, and I think she's going to be a player who helps them right away and is in that front court rotation early with Leah King and Lisa Carlin. So, she's one of those freshmen that's going to be kind of thrown into the fire, and we'll see right away how good she is.
All right, let's talk about NC State. You see them a lot in your area. They're coming off a Final Four trip, which is only something that you can build on and gives you momentum. This is year 12 for Wes Moore. He's been one of those people, I think, that has managed the portal. He has had the door swing both ways. He gets great veterans back in his backcourt. The biggest question mark has been the front court, because you and I talked about this in a while back, that there was no more River Baldwin or Mimi Collins on the inside. Your take on NC State, where Wes Moore sits, and maybe some of his apprehensions and things that they might be seeing here early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, the front court is really the big question mark. Wes's best teams that he's had at NC State have had a dominant center. For a while it was Elisa Cunane. Last year it was River Baldwin, and then Mimi Collins kind of, doing her Swiss Army knife kind of thing where she can bang inside and also step out and hit the three, from that power forward spot. That's a huge question mark for them right now. I think initially the plan was to have Boston transfer Caitlin Weimar, who was the Patriot League Player of the Year last season. I think it was the plan for her to just fill Baldwin's shoes and get the majority of those minutes at center. But I believe she had hip surgery.
That's what's been reported. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's, I think that's going to keep her out for probably the year, or at least a long while. And so, I think it's going to be kind of a center by committee thing there. You have some other options. You have a freshman from Sweden who's 6'6", and Tilda Trigger, who I don't really know anything about, but she's there and they're high on her. They also have Lizzie Williamson, who didn't play a ton for them last year, but at a previous stop, she was the WAC Defensive Player of the Year. So they have pieces. A lot of them are unproven. We'll just have to kind of see how that works. I think in the meantime, they're going to need those four guards, Isaiah James, Sanaya Rivers, Zoe Brooks, and Madison Hayes, to really sort of rebound as a team and rebound as a unit and help whoever is inside there with, some of that inside presence in terms of rebounding and rim protection. Sanaya Rivers, she's kind of a Swiss Army knife and can definitely do that. Madison Hayes as well. It's just going to be something that we'll have to keep an eye on early, and we'll see them tested pretty early. First Sunday of the season, they play South Carolina.
Yeah, and many times we've been looking at NC State and saying, well, this is a team that's going to play fast, even though they've got big centers. They may just have to play even faster right now, early, until they figure out what their post game and that rim protection is going to look like. In at 3 in that poll are the Duke Blue Devils. There's always a lot of question marks. There's always a lot of what is really going to happen. The one thing about Duke last year, incredibly young, one of the youngest rosters in the country. So those kids are back, and they're giving them, and they have experience. And sometimes you just throw freshmen into the fire and you see what happens. Good things happened for Duke last year. I mean, they won some games and they used those kids. Maybe the vibe around this Blue Devil program, which you heard it tip off, and as Carol Lawson embarks on this, maybe sort of what you think we're going to see from this Duke team.
Yeah, they're still really young. They only have 2 seniors on this team in Vanessa De Jesus, who is a graduate guard at this point. She didn't play at all last year because she was hurt. But before that, she was a guard that Kara Lawson really trusted a lot. So I think we're going to see her back into the mix. And the other senior is Reagan Richardson, who I think really took a step forward last season in terms of like being the number one scoring option. She was really great in the NCAA tournament. A big reason why they upset Ohio State to get to the Sweet 16, where they then, use their defense to sort of try to drag UConn into their hell. So they're going to be, I think, really good again. Pretty much everybody is back except for Kennedy Brown, who was their starting center last season, but they got some size, through their freshman class, and they have Delaney Thomas coming back as a sophomore. They have Jordan Wood coming back as a sophomore. Ariana Robinson is a 6'4" freshman. And then you have Toby Fournier, who is a 6'2" freshman, but regarded as one of the best prospects in the country, someone who can dunk with ease from what we've been told. So watching her and how she impacts Duke in her freshman season, I think is going to be a big thing. But yeah, they have a lot of interesting pieces, and kind of have a couple of Swiss Army knife players in Alucci and Jaden Donovan. Ashlyn Jackson is back. They got Riley Nelson from Maryland through the transfer portal. Taina Marr's back. So yeah, I think Duke is going to be really good this year. It's just like a question of how it all comes together, and like, are they still a team that's going to put defense first? Or will they have, kind of a little bit more of a punch and firepower on offense this season?
No, I think you're right. And Richardson herself, she comes back. One of the returns as their top scorer. She was about 12.5 points a game. This is an offense that returns close to 82% of its production. But as you said, still young players, you hope that they've learned, and a top 10 recruiting class, more young players that you throw into this. I think it creates still a lot of question marks and a lot of questions to be answered for Duke that they're going to have to do early. All right, let's talk about Louisville and Florida State. They round out the top 5, and then we'll talk in a moment about some of the other teams and the sleepers you think. Louisville always sort of an X factor in this league. There's no doubt. We know Jeff Walz is going to figure out a way to win games. And Florida State returning one of the best players in this league, in Tania Lotson, who's a junior now. Your thoughts on those two teams as they sit in this preseason ranking at 4 and 5? I think most people would have agreed, but there could have been some others that could have snuck in there as well.
Yeah, Louisville is a team that has a lot of questions as well. They got upset in the first round of the tournament last year by Middle Tennessee State, and now they've really embraced this youth movement. They have 8 true freshmen on this roster. Yeah. 2 of which are the daughters of NBA players, and McKinley Randolph, daughter of Zach, and Azalea Arenas, daughter of Gilbert. So they have, the returning starter for them is 5th-year forward Olivia Cochran, sure-handed rebounder, good presence inside. They got Jalea Williams from Miami. But yeah, I just, I don't know how it's going to look exactly, but I, at this point, just sort of trust Jeff Walz to figure it out. I'm sure they're going to win 20-plus games, and they're going to get into the tournament, and they might even be a top 4 seed. It's just a question of like which one of these or a couple of these freshmen emerge as like real game changers and starters for Louisville. I thought it's also interesting. Jeff Walz is now our longest tenured ACC head coach following the retirement of Katie Meyer. So isn't
that crazy? I mean, like that's the thing, because I feel like he just got there. Like I feel like he just got to Louisville, and then now all of a sudden he's the dean of the ACC coaches.
Yeah, 18th season. Jeff Walz still around. Still going to win a lot of games, I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, when we come back, Mitchell's on the spot yet again to tell us some more of the players to watch and some of the sleepers in this league that we've got to keep our eye on, which I think could be Florida State, one of those teams picked 5th in the preseason poll, but still some questions that go with the Seminoles. First, a message from our friends at GameTime, the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchases. You can filter incredible deals on great seats. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy it. All-in pricing shows you total cost up front. and buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that make getting tickets to see your favorite team play live even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of ticket options. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create that account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. I'm back here on Lockdown Women's Basketball. Mitchell Northam is with me today on this Monday. We're talking about all things ACC Women's Basketball. The season officially tips off a week from today, November 4th. With that said, we always know that the one thing you can expect out of the ACC, Mitchell, is surprises. Somebody's going to make a move. Somebody's going to fly on our radar, and we are going to learn the name of some player somewhere that nobody knew anything about. Before we talk about some of those sleepers, I do want to talk about Florida State because they are picked 5th in this preseason poll. And again, kind of one of those teams that's been teetering. We've seen them in the top 25 in the past. They've bounced out. They've lost close games. They've won ones people probably said they shouldn't. Just your take on what the Seminoles bring to the floor this year with one of the very best players in the league too.
Yeah. I mean, with Florida State, it's kind of like, I have to see it like at this point. The expectations are high. They're going to win, north of 20 games again. It's just kind of like, is this group ready to kind of take that meaningful step forward and win meaningful games in March? I think they have a really good, kind of big three there in Tania Latson, Michaela Timpson, and Amira Gordon. It's just a question of like, are those players about to take a step forward or a leap in their development? Are the pieces around them going to be better? I think Florida State's going to be a really solid team again. I just kind of wonder if, they're ready to kind of take that step forward into kind of like being an elite team again in this league, or are they going to kind of finish in the middle of the pack again in terms of like, they'll make the tournament, but are they going to be a top 4 seed?
Right. And I think that's the kind of one of those measuring sticks now that we're looking at as we've gone from Power 5 to Power 4 plus the Big East in basketball. So I know that gets confusing for folks, but I think that maybe has to sometimes be the measure that we have to think about some of these programs with anymore is that yet for a lot of people super pumped if I'm in a rebuild or we lost a lot or we were dealt a bad hand with injuries and adversity, you're just happy to be in the tournament. But yet I think the sign of putting yourself in that elite level bucket is I got to be a top 4 seed. And I need to be in that top 16 bucket because that means I've earned the opportunity to play at home. That means I've earned a chance to put myself in a much better spot than everybody else. And it seems to me that's more of the conversation. I don't know. In other leagues, I'm hearing it. I don't know what you thought about ACC, but I feel like being in the top 4, that is something a lot of people are gunning for now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's one of the, last year there was a lot of debate over like, should women's basketball go to, neutral sites for the first round? And I don't think they should. I think it's a feature, not a bug of the women's tournament that they have home host sites in that first weekend. And it's something that adds extra value to the regular season because that's something that teams are fighting for. Like in addition to, hey, we want to win our conference and we want to make the tournament, but we also want to get to this point where we're hosting first weekend tournament games as one of the top 16 teams in the nation. That really matters to teams as like a real goal. I definitely think that, that's something that Florida State should try for this year. And a lot of ACC teams are going to be gunning for it.
Yeah, it's got to be a goal. It's got to be one of those top things on the whiteboard. And I think it's got to stay there all year. So if you want to say you're one of the elite teams in your league, ACC, SEC, Big 12, doesn't matter. The top 4 kind of spells it out. And that puts you on the map. It makes people think. And it also puts a target on your back So if you were some of those other teams in the ACC this year, let's say a Miami, a Syracuse, a Clemson, who's in that rebuild, Stanford now in this new league, who on those, as you think about quote unquote sleeper teams, somebody that might make some noise that not a lot of people are expected about, I would think one of those also has to be North Carolina.
Yeah, I was going to say North Carolina. I'll start with them. I spent a lot of time with them last season. I think a lot of folks are kind of overlooking them because, they lost Deja Kelly and she was the centerpiece of that program for so long. But they really went out this offseason and retooled this roster with freshmen and transfers. The thing that killed them last season was the injuries. The last 9 games of the season, regular season and into the postseason, they only had, I think, 2 scholarship guards in Deja Kelly and Lexi Donarski. Then they were playing, walk-on Sydney Barker in spurts, and India Navarre was playing, but is she really a guard? No, not really. She's more of a wing. So this year, Kayla McPherson and Renaya Kelly, all signs point to them being healthy. Lainey Grant is here early. She's going to help them. And then they went out and got Grace Townsend from Richmond and Treyana Chris from Arizona State. So they really bolstered that backcourt, I feel like. And then the other thing is like Sierra Tumi is finally healthy. And I want
to ask, that was one, I was like, she circles on my list because there was a huge anticipation of seeing this young lady a year ago. She missed the season dealing with injury. I think it was a lingering one that she had from her high school time prior to getting to Chapel Hill. But there is big anticipation to get their eyes on this young lady. And I feel like she can help them right out of the gate.
Yeah. So, she had like a lingering, knee thing from high school that they mostly fixed over the summer. She was probably going to miss a couple games at the beginning of last season, but then she also broke her wrist on a scooter accident. So they decided just to redshirt her last year, but she started practicing, probably in like late February. And so got in some reps with the team last year and really worked in the weight room, got a whole year of working in a college weight room before ever stepping on a court. So she's bulked up. She's a player at ACC tip-off that Courtney Banghart compared to Brianna Stewart. I don't know if she's the type of player that's going to have the same impact as Stewie, but certainly I think brings the same sort of skill set in terms of like, she can post up and score inside, and she could also step out and hit a jumper off the dribble from deep range. So she's going to be somebody I think that is going to help them on both ends of the floor. She's going to open things up for Alyssa Utsby. I think she's going to be a bit of a game changer for them. So they're definitely a team that I think is going to outperform expectations and be right up there in the mix.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm excited to be able to watch Sierra Tumi play because, like you said, big anticipation. Didn't get a chance to see her last year and could be one of those impact redshirt freshmen this season. All right. If you got to pick one, my friend, I need somebody that's not on the radar, a team that somebody's not paying attention to. We mentioned Clemson, who we think at the very beginning they can win some games. We know that they're going to be well coached, as with everybody. You're going to win some, you're going to steal some on the road, you're going to lose one here or there you're not supposed to. But there's got to be somebody in the mid to bottom of this league in these preseason standings that can be that sleeper in 24-25.
Yeah, I'll since we haven't talked about them yet, I'll mention Miami as somebody that I think is going to outperform expectations and beat a couple teams that they're not supposed to and maybe sneak into the tournament. They have a first-year coach there, in Trisha Collop, who was at Toledo for a long time and kind of turned major power of sorts. They also retooled their roster. They have Jasmine Roberts back, but they also bring back the Cavender twins. They're back in college basketball now. And they got Nat Marshall from Notre Dame and Darion Rogers from Mississippi State. And a couple other pieces. And I think you're going to see them run, kind of an up-tempo style. I think you're going to see them embrace the three-pointer. And I think they're going to beat some teams that they're not supposed to, and they're going to have a resume strong enough to keep dancing in March.
Well, the Miami Hurricanes picked 8th in the preseason poll in the projected order of finish. 79 voters. As we said, 70 votes went to Notre Dame, 8 to NC State. And then the other one was to Stanford, most randomly, who we haven't talked a lot about. We talked about Kate Pay, but this is a loaded league, Mitchell. And what are you looking forward to as the college basketball season starts next week and we think ACC women's basketball?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what that Hannah Hidalgo, Olivia Miles partnership looks like. The new scheduling model is going to be interesting where, everybody's going to play each other once. And then that one protected rival twice. Looking forward to see how, NC State solves their problem at center, but also, if how much better Isaiah James, Sinai Rivers, and Zoe Brooks are. That's something I'm keeping an eye on. North Carolina, we talked about Sierra Tumi. I'm also interested in Cal. They have some interesting pieces and finished pretty well down the stretch last year. How they do in their first season here in the ACC after winning 19 games last year is interesting. Georgia Tech, I think, is primed to maybe take a step forward this year. They have a lot of continuity. They bring back, 3 of their top scorers. Virginia is another team. Like, are they going to take the next step forward? Syracuse is going to look a lot different without Deasia Fair, just in terms of someone who dominated the ball and had the ball in her hands on every possession. She's not there anymore. What are they going to look like? So there's a ton of things to watch in this league this year. A lot of question marks, a lot of interesting and exciting things.
Yeah, we got storylines abound and question marks out the wazoo. So if anybody's looking to get their questions answered right now, good luck, because nobody can answer any of them. I don't even think coaches have the answers to their questions, but they will start to get them next week because the college basketball season tips off a week from today, November 4th. That is when you will see real-time action. All right, Mitchell, where does everybody find you, my friend, on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Primetime Mitch. A couple of just, quick things to plug. At WUNC recently, I wrote about Tanisha Lewis and the UNC Asheville women's basketball team. They've been displaced by the impacts of, Hurricane Helene to Western North Carolina. So all preseason, they've been living out of a hotel in Charlotte and practicing wherever they can. It's Tanisha's first season there. She played for KL on a Final Four team at NC State before coming into UNC Asheville and won a CIAA title at Elizabeth City State. At the next, my lengthy ACC preview is up. I think it's north of 5,000 words and has thoughts and everything on all 18 teams. And then I'm launching a podcast this week. I'm partnering up with Mia O'Brien, who's based in Jacksonville, on a show that's simply titled The Women's Basketball Podcast. We're doing this with Dimitri Ravanos and OG Triangle Media, which North Carolina sports fans should know from, Joe Ovius and Joe Giglio, their popular show. It'll be a weekly thing where you get wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll also have a video version on YouTube. And we're going to try to talk about the sport on a national level like fans and hopefully have a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. Well, never a dull moment. And I don't know when he sleeps, but there's way too much going on. And like Mitchell, you get over the next, find not only his preview, but all of our other conference previews are running through there, which have been fantastic. More to come all this week before the season kicks off. Thank you, my friend. We will do this again here soon. And by then we'll even know, maybe have a few answers to some questions and actually some game results that we can talk about. I so appreciate you and appreciate your time. Get over to Twitter, find Mitchell. You can find me at Missy Heidrick on X, formerly known as Twitter, or whatever we want to call it. Then go to thenexthoops.com to find him, myself, and all of our amazing colleagues. We have you covered for all of your women's basketball coverage. Also, remember, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with all your new free Locked On NBA newsletter. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic week. Happy Halloween. Happy month of November. College basketball 1 week away.